Good morning. It's a cold morning here in the Rio Grande Valley, and I thought I'd warm things up today by talking about some blues albums by artists that I've seen in person. And I was very fortunate living most of my life in the Southern California area. I saw a lot of outstanding music, of course, rock music, jazz music. And during the 80s, I saw many blues legends either around town at some of the clubs or the Long Beach Blues Festival. So I'm going to share with you 10 albums by artists that I've seen in person, blues artists. And first of all, I'm going to start off with Muddy Waters. And this is I'm Ready. And this was done at the time when he was associated, of course, with Johnny Winter. Johnny Winter produced these albums. And it was Muddy's regular touring band, which included Walter Horton, Big Pine Top Perkins, Bob Margolin, Jerry Pointney, and Willie Big Eye Smith. And here Muddy's going through a lot of the standards. He does I'm Ready, 33 Years, Hoochie Coochie Man, Little Schoolgirl, Rock Me, Screaming and Crying. But all of these albums that he did with Johnny Winter are outstanding. And I saw Muddy at the Golden Bear in Huntington Beach, probably more or less about the time of this album. And I remember he opened it up singing Stormy Monday, which that's not really the kind of tune he would sing on a normal basis. In fact, I don't know if I ever heard him sing Stormy Monday, but it was well worth waiting in line in the rain. And I just remember the power of Muddy's voice was so powerful. And I don't think he even needed a microphone to be heard in that small club. But I was very fortunate to see the legend, Muddy Waters. Next up is another blues legend, of course, B.B. King. And this is B.B. King, Live and Well. And this is on the Bluesway label. He did a string of albums on Bluesway in the 60s into the 70s, I believe. And once again, this is B.B. King, Live and Well. There's the cover. And this series of albums were mostly gatefold albums. And I really enjoyed all of his Bluesway albums. And this one was no exception. This one includes one side of a live session and then another side of a studio. And one of my favorite cuts on here is Why I Sing the Blues. That became somewhat of a hit for BB in the I believe it was in the 60s, late 60s. And it's a great tune where he talks about why he sings the blues. And I saw BB on many occasions, probably maybe about 4, 5, 6 times, which was very fortunate. I saw him at the Long Beach Blues Festival, where it was his birthday one year, and everybody came out. They sang him happy birthday. That was a really memorable occasion. And I also, perhaps even better, saw him once again at the Golden Bear nightclub in Huntington Beach, in a small venue. And BB always had a very tight smoking band with horns, and he would come out. They'd play a couple tunes on their own, and then of course BB would come on stage with with Lucille and just blow the room apart. And I was very fortunate to see BB King, and he was definitely live and well when I heard him. Next up is an album I believe I've shared maybe on another video, but it's one of my all-time favorite blues albums. And of course, this is Hooker and Heat. It's just a dark photograph there of John Lee Hooker and Canned Heat. And this is the classic album that Hooker did, gatefold there. And of course, the sad thing about this album, it was done, it was the last recording of the late Blind Al Wilson, Hooker and Heat. And this is a wonderful double album done, I believe, in 1970. And it's got one side of John Lee all on his own, and then it's got a side of him with collaborating with Alan Wilson, either on harp or piano. And then sides 3 and 4, it's got the complete Canned Heat band. But I saw John Lee at the Long Beach Blues Festival, and I believe also at the Playboy Jazz Festival, and he would definitely get those boogies going. I mean, I remember he'd have the place hopping and dancing, and it was that endless boogie that only John Lee could do. And even though he was later in age, when I saw him, he definitely had a lot of energy, and it was such a joy that I was able to hear the Boogie Master, John Lee Hooker. Next up is Shuggie Otis. This is Shuggie Otis. Here comes Shuggie Otis. And Shuggie Otis is somewhat known among blues fans, blues collectors. He's a master guitar player. And what's unique about Shuggie is he came into, started making outstanding recordings at about the only age of 16. Of course, his father is the famous rhythm and blues man, Johnny Otis. You know, of course, he did Hand Jive. And there's Shuggie Otis. And I believe this was his debut album. This is Shuggie on Columbia, or actually it's on the Epic label. And this one finds him actually backed up by some of the musicians that would back up his dad. This includes Preston Love on horns, Malvin Moore, Gene Mighty Flea Connors on trombone, and let me see, Johnny Otis also himself is on organ. But this is a great debut by Shuggie. And he's really a great guitar player. You might remember him. He also did the album, one of the blues session he did with Al Kooper. But at a very young age, he had a lot of talent, and he's continued that talent through the years. I think there is a story that he was offered to join the Rolling Stones at one time, but he actually turned it down. But I heard Shuggie with his dad, Johnny Otis, at the Long Beach Blues Festival. And he would get spotlighted on a couple of tunes where he got to stretch out. But Johnny Otis kind of had a review going on where he had many artists. I remember Esther Phillips was part of the review, I heard, and quite a few others. But anytime Shuggie Otis would play and get the spotlight on him, he would really shine. So this is Here Comes Shuggie Otis. Next up is another blues master. This is Bobby Blue Bland, Two Steps from the Blues. And this is one of his classic albums on the Duke label. And here's the back of the album. And this is Bobby Blue Bland when he was in his prime. He's got Two Steps from the Blues, I'm Not Ashamed, Cry, 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 I've Just Got to Forget You. And Bobby Blue Bland was kind of more of uptown blues. He always had a big horn section, and he's unique in the blues world in the fact that he doesn't play an instrument. He was strictly known as a blues vocalist. But I heard him at the Long Beach Blues Festival, and he always had a cracking band full of trumpet, saxophone, and once again, somewhat like BB, the band would warm up, and then Bobby would come out and he would just set the place on fire, singing Turn On Your Love Light, and many of his other great tunes that only Bobby could do. And I was fortunate to hear Bobby Blue Band. Can't go wrong with any of these early albums by him. Also, he started doing some albums. There's, I believe, 2 albums that he did with B.B. King live in the studio. Those are also very outstanding albums. Next up, kind of changing it up, this is the Fabulous Thunderbirds. And if you don't know who the Fabulous Thunderbirds are, they had a run of a couple of hits, I believe in the 80s on MTV. But what I know them most as is just a really hardcore blues band with Jimmy Vaughn on guitar and Kim Wilson on harmonica. And this is, I believe, their first or their second album. And I was able to hear the Fabulous Thunderbirds at a small nightclub in Anaheim, California. And I remember it was a very small nightclub, and I got there and there was maybe only a handful of people there, maybe like 20 people. But the Thunderbirds put on an amazing show, just so full of energy. They had the place rocking and rolling, just with some great sounding blues with Jimmy Vaughn on guitar. And I'll have to be truthful, and I might get some feedback on this, but I really prefer Jimmy to, of course, his famous brother, Stevie Ray. But Jimmy is in a class by himself. He's not as flashy as his brother, but he really gets a down-home, pure blues sound. And I just really have loved Jimmy Vaughn. He's still with us even today, still playing. But I was once again fortunate to hear the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and this is called What's the Word? And pick up on the first two Thunderbird albums. They're more pure blues than they would go on to be later. Maybe the first 3 or 4 albums, but the Fabulous Thunderbirds. Another one, Robert Cray. This is Robert Cray, Strong Persuader. This is on the Mercury label. And this album includes one of his more famous songs called Smoking Gun. It got a lot of airplay. I don't know about on mainstream stations, but in the blues world, it got quite a bit of play. And Robert Cray, he was kind of the up and coming guy, the blues guy that came up in the late 70s and the 80s. And he's a very talented guy. I believe he's from the Washington area, but an outstanding guitar player, great vocalist, kind of with a soul type edge. And this is another one I heard at the Long Beach Blues Festival and also at a small nightclub in Redondo Beach, California. But Robert Cray, he was, like I say, he was really good on the Telecaster guitar there. And he's still around singing today too, Robert Cray. This one is Strong Persuader. Next up, Clifton Chenier Live. I have to say that Clifton Chenier Live was such a force to see in person. I had never even heard the music of Clifton Chenier, and I went just kind of on a lark to go see him at a small club. And I remember driving up and I saw Clifton, I guess the band was traveling in a van with a trailer behind, pulling all the band instruments. And it said Clifton Chenier and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And I believe they came all the way from Louisiana on the road. Those were tough traveling days, I'm sure. But you can see Clifton, he's there on accordion, and his brother Cleveland on rubboard. And he plays a form of blues called Zydeco. And Zydeco, if you're not familiar, started out in Louisiana, and it primarily has accordion as its prime instrument instead of guitar, which is of course more common in blues music. Clifton was a force of nature. This is the live album here on the Aruli label. And the thing about Clifton Chenier is some of his tunes are sung in French, and of course some of it in English. Some of it is pure Zydeco, and some of it is blues. But I tell you one thing, Clifton got the floor hopping when he was playing at the club that I saw him. And he must have played for about 2 hours. And I know he was in bad health in those days. I believe he was traveling and he was actually on dialysis at times. But he just gave a red hot show. And I remember him just sweating up a storm and just saying, "Can we get a little hotter?" And man, the people were just hopping and grooving to Clifton Chenier. So pick up any of his albums on the Arhoolie label. They're all outstanding. And this one is recorded live at a French Creole dance. So this one is really outstanding because you definitely get the live feel because it's done live. But Clifton Chenier live. Couple more here to go. Charles Brown. Charles Brown might not be known to a lot of you. This is Charles Brown, One More for the Road. And this is on the Alligator label. Of course, you blues fans know the Alligator label, which was really putting out some outstanding records in the 70s, 80s, and beyond. But this is Charles Brown, back cover, One More for the Road. And this is some later Charles. He's backed up by some great jazz musicians, Billy Butler on guitar, Harold Owsley on tenor sax, Earl May acoustic bass, and Kenny Washington. This is another artist that I saw at the Long Beach Blues Festival. And most of you are probably familiar through Charles only through his big Christmas hit, Merry Christmas Baby, which of course is played to death during Christmas time. But that's a prime example of Charles' style. He plays piano and he plays in a very kind of a mellow, bluesy croon voice, maybe somewhat akin to Nat King Cole, but he's definitely the blues all the way. But I was very fortunate, and I think Charles Brown sometimes gets overlooked because his style of blues is not that popular, but he's definitely a blues artist to be reckoned with. Charles Brown, One More for the Road. And finally, an artist that many of you have heard through the years, and that's Big Joe Turner, and in this case, he's with Count Basie, The Bosses. And this is on the Pablo label. And Pablo, which is primarily known for their their jazz releases. And here, Big Joe is surrounded by an all-star lineup, which includes Count Basie on piano, Eddie Lockjaw Davis on tenor, Zoot Sims on tenor, Harry Edison on trumpet, J.J. Johnson on trombone, Ray Brown on bass, and Louis Bellson on drums. But this is a great album. Big Joe is in great form here. I believe it was recorded in about 1974. And of course, I mean, can you get better backing than those guys? And these guys, even though they're jazz guys, they got that black jazz blues feel, Kansas City style. And Big Joe was just shouting out the blues. And when I heard Big Joe at the Long Beach Blues Festival, even though he had to be helped upstage with crutches due to his advanced age, he would get up there and just shout out those blues with authority and just so much fun. I remember just a lot of fun to see Big Joe Turner live. So this is Big Joe Turner, the Bosses, Joe Turner, and Count Basie. So that was a look at some of my blues albums that by artists that I've seen in person. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you like, subscribe. And that's all for today. Joseph out.